What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Comic Book Hit List. You got Steven Cool Tie,
Yo, what's up?
and today we are talking about all things Batman, but
Yeah,
specifically our favorite / best writer. Ty and I have both selected a writer. We don't know who each other has picked, so this ought to be really interesting
Yeah.
to hear who each other picked.
Yeah.
I'm gonna let Ty go first.
Yeah. So, Steve and I were talking about this just before the show. And if those of you who've been joining us from, episode 1, you'll realize that Steve and I don't actually talk about, we know the topic, but we don't actually talk about what each of us will talk about during the show. We keep that pretty much a secret until the show goes. So it leads way to a lot of spontaneity, but it also leads way to a lot of crazy chaos. So follow along with us. So that being said, I am not a big Batman fan. And I think I've said this a few times in a few different episodes is I usually follow the writer. I'm not really big to jump on if a certain artist is going to be there, but if the story is going to be something that I feel is going to be worthwhile to read, I'm going to read it. And usually a lot of big stories come with big name artists, but some haven't. There's the really good story by Dwayne McDuffie, who wrote a really good Batman story. He's not the person that I chose, but that's another good one. So I had to look at somebody who brought me on to the Batman scene, who held my attention, and who I felt, for me, utilized Batman's rogue gallery very, very well. So because Batman has no powers, and because I think he's an earthbound hero, I think he's a great detective, I used my criteria of who could use him in that way the best for me. And for me, I chose Greg Rucka. Greg Rucka for me has really sparked my attention when he's done certain things. Lazarus being the thing that I probably enjoyed the most. Of course, there was Whiteout. He did some Daredevil that I had read. But for me, the thing that really opened me up to who he was his Batman run. And it was his Batman run that started with, I think at the end of No Man's Land, that went into Batman Murderer, that went into Batman Fugitive. Batman Murderer and Fugitive for me, because I kind of got on at the end of No Man's Land, even though it was really good. I think I went back and read most of it, but I actually started picking up the issues closer to the end of that story arc. But Murderer and Fugitive for me were quintessential Batman stories. It told stories of Gotham. It told stories of a lot of crime by a lot of street level criminals who Batman actually had to outwit and outfight. So on those criteria, I went with Greg Rucka.
That's a good pick. I will be completely honest. He did not cross my mind, which thinking back is quite shocking now. Greg Rucka is a great writer. I have that run also. I have No Man's Land, Bruce Wayne Fugitive, Murderer. That was a pretty long series, and it really took Batman and Bruce Wayne into a lot of different places. So that's a good pick. I will say he's probably, now that I think about it, in my honorable mentions category. My other honorable mention that I did think of was Jeff Loeb, who we've talked about before. He has done some iconic Batman stuff at this point. Dark Victory, Long Halloween, Hush. But you thought that was my pick, didn't you?
At one point, I did think he was going to go with that, but I think, nah, he might think I would already know what that is. So I figured you was going to try to pull a rabbit out of a hat, or in this case, a bat out of a cowl.
Well, to me, this one, I didn't have to think about it too hard, but I did want to be sure. So I did go back and read some of the earlier stories. But my pick for the best Batman writer is Scott Snyder. Scott Snyder has, at this point, written Batman for almost 10 years, which is really pretty crazy. Yeah, pretty insane if you think about it. And he's been consistently writing Batman. So he started with Detective, and then he moved on to the main Batman title. He started All-Star Batman. He's done some one-shots and sort of crossover dark metal. He just did, I think, his last Batman story, Last Night on Earth. And I picked to reread the story about the Riddler within Secret Year and Year Zero Year, excuse me. The thing with his Batman is, and it's maybe because he's had so much time to play with him and experiment and evolve the character, but he has done a lot of new stuff that, I think you don't think of traditionally with Batman. His Batman is very fallible. He's not all-knowing. He's not always prepared. He is prepared. He's very intelligent. His detective skills come into play a lot in a lot of the stories. His training. He just seems more human than other writers that Batman have that other people have written Batman as, like this supernatural force that criminals, they're always afraid of it, and they panic at the sight of them. His villains are not like that, and the Batman character seems very much mortal. He's always put in danger. He's always put in really almost fatal danger, and he does always find a way out because he is Batman. But every time Scott Snyder, he puts him through the ringer, and he ups the tension that way. Back to your point about writers, I was not aware of Scott Snyder and how popular this run is. I actually went back when I found out that he had written so much of it, and I thought to myself, well, if he's been writing Batman this long, it's got to be good. It's got to be at least worth picking up to read, to see where he falls in the halls of the best Batman writers. And so now I'm a huge fan of Scott Snyder. I'll pick up pretty much anything he has done in the past and will do. For me, there's, just as far as how much work he's done, how consistent, it's Scott Snyder for me.
Yeah. You said your point about making him relatable. See, I think Greg Rucka has done a better job at doing that. And this is why. When I read Greg Rucka's Batman, and I'm going to specifically kind of stick with the Bruce Wayne murderer, Bruce Wayne fugitive, because that was kind of my jumping on point to like some really good Batman writing. Because again, before then I only read sporadic things here and there, but that was the one thing where I specifically read each and every single issue. Like I bought every issue to make sure I didn't miss a thing. Rucka put Batman on such a human level. He put him as the center of a crime. He actually made him a little off kilter. Like, I'm rattled now. Like, I'm really at this juncture where I can't outmaneuver what's already happened. Like, the clues really are in front of me, and I'm not able to see through them. When he put Sasha, he put them in jail and gave them this emotional, romantic prison inmate life where they were both holding out for each other, where she was 100% no matter what. She was going to not snitch. So when I look at that, I look at like some really good American criminal stories where it involves jail. And that's how this story felt to me. And they were trying to break her. She was undoubtedly going to hold that line for him. And then as he and this was another piece that I really liked about him, his Bruce Wayne persona, because there was a whole part about this where he wasn't Batman at all. It was his Bruce Wayne persona. He made him feel like an average person going through this trauma that he's trying to figure out. I started tonight For Life. The guy from Carolina who moves up to New Jersey and like I think in 90 something ends up being convicted for drugs that he didn't really do. It has a feel like that. And I want to shout out to 50 Cent and also my boy Erskine, who's actually in that TV series. It gave him a more personal, down-to-earth, street-level feel. And when I see Batman or Bruce Wayne deal with those issues, for me, that's how I know someone is, and I'm like really interested in it. That's how I know that a writer has done a good job. Because reading Snyder's Metal, that's a huge cosmic story. I liked it. It was a good story, but it wasn't the Batman that I was so used to, right? So for me, those were two pieces to where I could see Bruce Wayne's life without Batman really made him, I am here to protect the people of Crime Alley. And now that I can't do that, what's going to happen? So it gave a feel of, now my life really has nothing to do with the Watchtower, right? I fund it, I do all this stuff, but my life doesn't really have anything to do out there. This here in Gotham is really my life.
Greg Rucka is a master of crime. I completely agree with the parts about Sasha. I think that was one of the best parts of that story was their relationship, which undoubtedly to me was the centerpiece beyond sort of the did he or didn't he do it, because I think we all know that Batman would never kill, and the rest of it though, where he was Bruce Wayne, I completely agree. There was a very good balance there. Rucka knows how to write crime. He knows how to balance relationships. He knows how to he does know how to make the characters feel actually human. Yeah. And another word on Rucka before I jump over to Snyder is Rucka has done a series of books that they're great. I've read I think all of them. The titles escape me. Guys, let us know in the comments which one is your favorite. But it's a series about a bodyguard. I think a team of bodyguards, and one bodyguard in particular. And then there is an assassin that they are tracking in one of the books. And it's a great cat and mouse. Again, very relatable characters. They feel like they're people that you know. But going back to Batman, I think the key relationship in Snyder's run is with Alfred, which I think that has been something that people have done before. But this Alfred is a little bit different. The Alfred and Batman team is more like Batman and Robin, actually. And Alfred is not just a former medic and patches it up whenever he's gravely wounded, but he is with him every step of the way. He is in his ear. He's telling him where to go. He's advising him. This Batman is not all-knowing. He is definitely more human from that aspect of.
That's a good point.
He's not always prepared, but he's got the tools and resources on the spot. There's a lot of, he calls a lot of audibles, I would say, in the stories. I think this sort of, leads you in one way and then zag, so that it's not what you're expecting, and so it just makes things more exciting, even though he's going to win at the end. Right. The way he does it doesn't always flow like in a normal progression.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to mention was the villains. So
that's where I was going next.
So in Bruce Wayne Murderer and Fugitive, I believe there was only a few key villains. And with Snyder's run, he used old school villains, he used new villains. I think most famously the Court of Owls.
Yeah.
Which I thought that was a pretty strong intro to his Batman run. Although it wasn't my favorite. I think my favorite again was the Riddler. And that's another reason why I picked Scott Snyder is he turned the Riddler into somebody very, very dangerous.
Yeah.
Very much like this is not a guy I want to mess with. I think we usually remember him from the animated series or probably Hush as well. But if you recall in Hush, he wasn't really in it that much. Yeah. He was like the mastermind, but
in the far back.
In the far, far back.
Right.
Right. But in the 0 Year and the Secret City arcs, he was in the back. He was the mastermind. He was manipulating other villains to do his dirty work. But he came to the forefront, and this Riddler was much more dangerous because, yeah, he did the sort of hokey riddle thing, but he also used his intelligence in a way that it turned into physical dangers in a non-trivial way.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me, that's just an example of one of the villains that he just repurposed that you would never think to do it in that way.
Right. I would agree. And I think that repurposing of a villain and taking them from their traditional hokey type Batman rogue villain, Mad Hatter character to what we saw in Hush, to what we saw in, Snyder's Riddler is exactly what thing that kind of gave him some power. When I look at the rogues, I actually wanted to see the rogues in kind of their original form. And so what I think Rucka did was he took the rogues and pushed them out more in their original form. I look at his rogues as the rogues in a James Bond movie, right? And the way Rucka has written it, you can kind of pluck out James Bond or pluck out Batman and insert, James Bond, and the story still works perfectly. The cape and cowl he just happens to be wearing a cape and cowl versus, an overcoat and some, $3,000 penny loafers. He used them in such an instrumental way that allowed Batman to be familiar with them, but still have trouble. So like, I know these characters, because I've already beaten them many times. I've already figured out their plan, but Rucka put a little twist on it that made them a little bit more sinister, that made them a little bit more devious, but still in that traditional form. I really love when these writers use Poison Ivy, and I think she's one that doesn't get used a whole lot. I mean, doesn't get used to her fullest potential. And here's a nod to Snyder. I actually felt that one of Poison Ivy's strongest moments was in Swamp Thing. I saw Poison Ivy be used again, really, really good in the Batman Hush storyline. So I actually like Poison Ivy. She's probably one of my favorite villains that I don't have a sketch commission a page of, which is, I'm gonna have to rectify that soon. He used her well. And, I always think of the vine metaphorically as strangling Bruce Wayne out, but to a point where Poison Ivy is not like your typical, for me, I look at her, she's not like your typical criminal. She has a purpose, almost like a Black Manta. I could see them two teaming up to do a really good story together. But I like the way these rogues were used. I think he used these rogues to not only just be characters on, well, here's a Batman story, let's bring in some characters. It was, here's a Batman story, how can I elevate this story? And by using the rogues the way Rucka did, he actually used them to elevate the story. Not just, there's some Batman stories, there's some Batman stories where they just throw in these rogues because he needs a good fight, or he throw in these rogues because he needs a good, detective moment. But it was for this particular story is a little bit more than just, well, I need some characters, so let's use these. Like, let's really purposely use them to create the next levels of this story.
You talk about villains in a really interesting way, and it actually takes me back to you mentioning dark metal, how Rucka elevates his villains, and I think Snyder does that too, but I think he elevates him in a way that it's less grounded. It definitely feels more over the top, sometimes weird, sometimes fantastical, but I think he is stretching the imagination of what has been done with Batman. Very reminiscent to me of what Grant Morrison did on his Batman run. But I think Grant Morrison sometimes when he's writing, not just for Batman, but he just goes so far out there, so high conceptual. I mean, it definitely goes over my head a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And that just speaks to my level of intelligence. But
or his level of writing.
Or his level of writing, exactly. But Snyder, he does it in a way, and it's a little bit more understandable. He does use exposition a lot. There's a lot of dialogue in his books. Dark Metal, I think, is a good example of that, where it's a strong, high concept, but it's easy to follow.
Mm-hmm.
Which I will agree with you on that particular story. It didn't grab me as much, I think, as I would have thought. But if you read his latest story, I think it's his final story, The Last Night on Earth, it ties together a lot of concepts that he's been, again, experimenting with throughout his Batman run. And
mm-hmm.
I won't give it away, but the main premise of the book is essentially what happens when Batman lives forever. Those are the types of ideas that he is playing with. That yes, it is not as grounded in reality. Sometimes it's not as human. Again, it is more on the fantastical sense. But again, we're talking about Batman here. He himself is elevated to a degree where, even though he's a human,
right,
he should be able to do all of these things,
right,
because he finds a way.
Right. And for me, that's why I felt like with Rucka's run, the Batman that he was writing and the rogues that he was writing, they fit together in such a fantastic way that it was almost impossible to put Batman in anything else other than this ultimate human being, to where Batman could literally have been the best detective or the best FBI or CIA agent who's purely good, working for the benefit of humanity. And that's how I see, Rucka having used this. Of course, we always think about Sherlock Holmes when people read Batman, because he's, this great detective, right? And I think with that piece in mind, you actually kind of see through his run that he really is, he has this brain that just constantly working. But a point that Rucka also did was he also made Batman very human. He didn't always have a complete answer. When they got locked up, it was a process for him. He was down, he was sad, he was in distress, what most people would be if they ever ended up in jail and, said that they, framed for something that they didn't do. But here they are thinking that, well, maybe you actually did do it. Maybe all signs point to you. Granted, you didn't do it, but then why is it that someone has totally put this in this, I guess, in this perspective, in this manner to beat you down? And of course, we know the rogues and all that other good stuff, and people are just out to get Batman. But that's how Rucka made me feel. He made me, again, he just made me feel with this story that anybody could be Batman. And I think, sometimes as I read Snyder's run, it doesn't always feel like anybody could be Batman.
You're absolutely right.
Right. With Rucka, anybody could be Batman. You could train yourself physically, mentally, emotionally to be Batman. And because it had that real life feel to it, it just drew me in. And I look at this cover here by John McCrae, um, who I wouldn't even think would be a really good Batman artist, because I've seen him do other things that I think he does better, and this one didn't really appeal to me. But as I looked at this cover actually speaks a lot of what Rucka's run actually looked like. Batman looks like a man in a bat suit versus this high-tech superpower, muscles bulging character.
I think that the popularity of Batman extends to both how Rucka has framed Bruce Wayne and Batman in the story, where he is human, relatable, attainable, and also the way Snyder has written him, where he is, yes, almost a little bit on the superhuman side, but he's going up against supervillains.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a little less in the realm of possibility. Although I would say that there are some instances where he does seem human. There is, he does show emotion, that there is depth in the characters, but it does feel majority more like this is a guy that's like one in a trillion.
Mm-hmm. If I were to look at Rucka's run, right, and of course it can be perfect, because I'm thinking, what else would I have wanted to see? So I guess my question to you is, and I'll start off, what was there something you would have wanted to have seen in Snyder's run that wasn't there? For me, I wanted to have seen in this particular run more of Batman's awesome tech, the plane, the boat, the wings, more of that tech that's actually based in real, R&D development that can be used. And again, not so much as the supersonic missile that can get me to outer space. And that's something that I would have wanted to see. I really love, when I read a good Batman story, I really like the fact that, the car and the motorcycle and the wings and the boat, and he has this tech that just kind of helps aids him in this particular, in whatever his endeavors are. His comic book style is going to sound like a real life story, which is great. Don't get me wrong, but even in real life story, people have really nice cars that go fast, and the plane and the helicopter. So for me, that would have been something that I wanted to have seen Rucka use more in the story. It wasn't missing it, but had he added a little bit more, I think it would have added to this mega run of these two story arcs.
That's a really good question. Before I get to my answer, I'll give you an answer on why Snyder's run has all of that in spades.
Mm-hmm.
2 words, 1 word: Bat Blimp.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I guess that takes it.
For me, that's a really good question. The first thing that comes to my mind, because we're talking about Rucka, is the female relationship. Rucka wrote that relationship so well.
Masterfully.
He introduced an interesting character to the Batman mythos that I wouldn't say it was formulaic, but you could kind of see where it was headed. It's been a while since I've read towards the end of Snyder's run. There is a relationship with, I think it was Julie Madison, but prior to that, the Batman stories that Snyder wrote were mostly action. They were mostly go go go.
Mm-hmm.
There were less of those quiet stories, some quiet moments, but overall stories. He put Batman through the ringer. So if you like just Batman getting tested every which way, every corner, using all of the tech, all of the cool gadgets, some grounded in reality, some just way out there, then Snyder's run is for you. But I would say, I think first and foremost, yeah, a relationship that just makes him seem more human, makes him seem more like, and totally not. It could be totally not related to, being a superhero. So having a love interest, having a long-standing love interest. I think that to me was something that I wished Snyder added a little bit more of.
And I like when he has these emotional turmoil mix-ups with the Bat family that causes him to rethink his plan, right? Because there are some stories where I got a plan, oh, but Robin is here. Wait a minute, let me rethink a next step of how to make sure that Robin is going to be taken care of here. He's got his part to play, blah, blah, blah. Even though I'm going to act like nothing, I'm thinking ahead. And I think that's the one thing that Rucka does really well. Even though Batman comes across as, I don't need you, do your part, do what you're supposed to. I felt that sometimes he does that, well, here's my soft moment where I have to lean back on someone to get some help. And a nod to Snyder, he did do that in Metal.
I would say that in Snyder's run, he does also have Batman lean on people, a supporting cast. And I think that's, again, another reason why I liked Snyder's run, was that he didn't make this, the Batman that can do everything anytime by himself. He had a lot of support. He always had Alfred. He had Lucius Fox. He had Jim Gordon, who was very instrumental in Snyder's run as well. So I want to say they both had a very strong supporting cast.
I would have to agree that they both had supporting cast, whereas in this particular run, I don't think the superpowers, in Rucka's run, the superpowers didn't play as big as a role as they did in Snyder's run. And again, that leads way to why I'm saying Greg Rucka is one of the favorite or best Batman writers. And I think oftentimes people create Batman in the center of save the world, let's go to the next planet and help. I think those are all great stories, and those are not all great, but I think those are good stories. Some of them are great, some of them are not so great. I think it has its place. But I think for the Batman writer or the Batman enthusiast, having Batman focus in on Crime Alley, focus in on the human side of the story. One of the, and now that I just thought about this scene, and it's always been one of those scenes where I think it's in Batman Trial of the Gun. He holds this kid in his arms, and it's just it's a real Batman moment, right? And that's what Rucka did immensely. He gave us real Batman moments where the cape and cowl kind of got crossed. Are we looking at Batman right now, or are we looking at Bruce Wayne right now? And I think Greg Rucka did a great job of that, because sometimes I want to see Bruce Wayne in the cape and cowl fighting. Other times I want to see this is purely Batman fighting. But when you cross that two, you give an interesting mix of, wait, who's actually doing the talking? Who's actually doing the fighting? And Rucka just masterfully pulls that off, which is why I think, if you don't have copies or your own set of, and again, that's the whole point of the story, of the show, right? Is to entice you to go out and grab these stories that you may not have. You may not even thought about them, because I know there are Marvel people who don't really get down with Batman, or Image people who, they're quasi-Batman fans. There's a whole great run here that Rucka has put together that has made Batman who Batman is. And I think that's another piece as to why this was such a great run, two great story arcs, is because it helped redefine who he really was.
I liked how Rucka really sort of tore down Bruce Wayne out of that Batman persona and sort of saw who he really was underneath that, and again gave him that ability to have a relationship with someone outside of the Bat family, which I thought, that's a little bit different.
Yeah.
I still think that, the way Snyder crafted these stories was just a mix of action with twists and turns that you wouldn't expect, with new villains, with old villains, giving him different challenges in a way that he hasn't been challenged before. And also, I forgot to add, this Batman is the new 52 Batman.
Right.
And I bring that up because everything before that was sort of like the not traditional, but sort of like you would say, almost like he was a postmodern Batman.
Mm-hmm.
This new 52 Batman. So it was almost like a reimagining, almost like the Ultimate line for Marvel. And so if you think about that,
or the All-Star line,
or the All-Star line, I think the All-Star line was sort of a gray area.
Yeah.
But with Snyder's Batman, the reason why that's important is because he purposely and deliberately chose not to do things or not to write stories the way they were written before and put Batman in those positions. So he has the advantage of history. So if he were to do a story where he gets framed and he falls in love with his bodyguard, well, guess what? It sounds exactly like what Rucka did. So if you think about it from that perspective too, he has got to try different things. He's got to try new things that you may or may not like.
Right.
Because he can't do things that were done already. It would seem too repetitive. It wouldn't grab you, because you would think, oh, well, that's Bruce Wayne Fugitive, or that's that's Batman Year One, or that's Dark Knight Returns. How many times have we seen writers and artists try to replicate that and fail hard?
Fail hard. You're absolutely right. And a nod to Greg Rucka for taking that history and putting such an interesting spin on it. Again, I would have to go back and be a huge Batman enthusiast to know if this is happening again. And guys and girls, if you absolutely know that Batman has been a murderer and a fugitive, and there's been a very similar story arc, I don't know. Let us know. Put it in the comments below. Absolutely. You know, when you mention history and you mention Scott Snyder having to try something totally different, you're absolutely right. He kind of had to break the mold to stake his claim in, I'm a really good Batman writer for this number of years. Whereas I think for Greg Rucka, he didn't have to do that. I think he had to say, I have this whole playground to play in. How can I take this character and remold it and give it to people? But Rucka, I do believe, because this was years ago before they would have allowed writers to have such autonomy with the characters now, right? I mean, we can agree with that. Now you have more ability to kind of take the character away from its traditional roots. I think Rucka had to play in this playground that was still gated, that was still on, he had to stay on this path, which made his writing style more detailed, more intricate, because he had to stay on target. He had to stay on this path because the Batman house was like, no, you can't do this. But he still made it so intriguing that it kind of blew the tops off of it. So that is another reason why I'm like so into this Rucka story, into these two story arcs, because I just think Rucka took kind of what he took in it. He took this egg and blew it up and reformed the egg bigger, stronger, better.
I like both analogies. I particularly like the playground analogy, to use that with Snyder, where Rucka had to play within a playground. Snyder built his own playground.
Exactly.
And there were some parts where, yeah, I think it was a little bit rough, but there were a lot of it. The majority of it was just he blew the socks off the stories. He blew the socks off the characters, and everything together was just to me an amazing run. I mean, I think it's going to go down as one of the top, if not the top, epic Batman run.
I would agree.
He took Batman to, some different places, maybe new places. And Snyder, I think his focus wasn't wasn't just different places, but also reimagining some of the places that he's been.
Right.
For example, he did do a year one type story where it's a brand new Batman, and if you read that and then reread Frank Miller's year one, I think you'll see a little bit of similarity. But Snyder had the benefit of having more time, more issues to sort of expand upon the work in the universe. But he did it so well. He gave Thomas and Martha more depth.
Oh my gosh, did he? Yes.
So when he did the famous Crime Alley scene, it hurt that much more.
Yeah.
And Frank Miller's iconic with how he did those 4 issues, but what Snyder did was he didn't expand upon them. He did it in his own way, and he did that with a lot of the villains too. He did that with the Joker. He did that with the Riddler. He created new villains, which they were new, but they're still long-standing now. And so again, he's got this way of taking things to a different area and also reimagining things that they feel somewhat familiar. And to me, the creativity there is really what elevates his run.
I have to tip my hat to Snyder for his elevation of the Waynes. I was hoping maybe you didn't bring that up, because that might be a point against me in this fight against who's the better writer. But I have to admit, and you hit the nail on the head, man. He gave the Waynes more of a Batman relevant story, because we all know the Waynes as the reason. We all know all the artists and the writers want to do another recap on the Crime Alley. We all know that if we see a new writer on Batman, we're eventually going to see the pearls being ripped. They're going to bounce on we know that, right? I have to give it to Snyder. This rendition or this expansion of Thomas and Martha Wayne, hands down, created some emotion. Hands down, created something spectacular.
And going back to the Waynes, he didn't just focus on Thomas and Martha. He went back even farther.
Yeah.
He went back even farther, I think, to his great-great-grandfather. He went to Alfred's dad. He brought him into the story. He made him an actual character. This was in his All-Star Batman run. But again, it's not just expansion to what you were saying. There's more depth. It adds to the overall story, or it adds to the main storyline that is coming into play. And again, that's just something that a lot other writers, they haven't really gone into that area, if you will.
Yeah, Snyder did it better, because he actually made the Waynes a character. I mean, they've always been a character. We know who they are, but made them a pivotal character, gave them history of their life in Gotham with this society, which I thought was just ingenious. I don't think anyone's actually used the Waynes as like a real major driving force to keep the story going, and Bruce and Batman kind of be backup to them. That's what Snyder did with this particular part. He made them, it's the Waynes, it's Martha and Thomas, and now now we're going to have Batman catch up. So I think he masterfully used the Waynes in this story, and that one I'll have to give to him.
I completely agree with you, and that's a really good point of making the Waynes a character. I didn't even think about that, but yes, he made the Waynes collectively this deeper character that you sort of know on the surface from, again, the famous shots of them in Crime Alley. I will say though, Grant Morrison, he did go into that in a little bit of detail too. I think particularly in his Return of Bruce Wayne run, or tried, and he, I think he just was bold enough to say, let me let's see it. Let's see where this goes. I mean, he obviously had a plan for, I would say the vast majority of what he wrote and sort of where it was leading to. But before all that, I think he had to go to his editors and say, hey, I'm going to try some stuff.
Yeah.
And, people might love it. People might hate it.
Yeah.
But let's just see where this goes. Some good writing to back up where I want to take Batman and all of these characters. And I think the fans are going to like it.
And I think Greg Rucka, had he stepped up to the Batman house with that idea, they would have been like, nah, not going to happen.
I think at the time, you're right.
I think at the time they would have been like, nah, not going to happen.
We are definitely comparing, folks, different times in DC.
In different, let me see if I can
eras.
Different eras in editors and what an editor would approve or not. Because we know that's always been a major issue, whether it's Batman or Superman or X-Men. The editors have a way of the way this story should look and the way this character should act. It's the whole thing with, should Batman have a gun or should he not have a gun? Why doesn't he use it? I think Greg Rucka was in an era where he had less ability. Now, again, I don't know. Greg Rucka, if you're out there listening, or those Greg Rucka, have him to drop us some lines and give us some words of wisdom on how he was allowed to maneuver and play in that Batman playground during that time. Another thing that I'm really interested about, because I know the Scott Snyder Batman sold well. It was kind of the talk of the town. Am I right?
I think it was, but I could be wrong because I had to go back again to pick up the trades. I didn't actually pick up the individual issues.
I picked up the individual issues. I probably jumped on Snyder's Batman. I got number 1 because I figured, I should get number 1, but then I didn't get anything else. I literally would go to cons and I would comb through back issue bins, and I was literally picking up 20, 30 issues of Snyder's Batman run. Like I was that far behind, so I had to go back and read it. I would like to know the sales reports on the Batman Bruce Wayne Murderer Fugitive run versus the Greg Rucka new 52, I'm sorry, Scott Snyder new 52 Batman. I would like to know it would be interesting to know if Greg Rucka had higher sales than that, based on inflation and the price of the book and this and that. But I'm curious and if anybody out there knows that, and I know, you guys as our listeners, we know you guys are quite the intelligent, savvy comic connoisseurs and researchers. I'm sure some of you will go out there and put that in the comments. Let us know, what were the sales? Did the new 52 Batman, Snyder's Batman, completely outsell Greg Rucka's run? And again, at the time, I wasn't thinking about, with Greg Rucka's run, I wasn't thinking about sales. I wasn't thinking about anything. I was more so into, wow, this is a really good story. But with Scott Snyder in this era, because he was brought in specifically to sell books, in this era, it was all about, oh, I wonder what's the population on that book, or what's the circulation on that book? How many were printed up? How many did this? Whereas I personally wasn't thinking that, and I don't know how many people were. I know the average collector might not have been thinking about how many of these books were sold. And I know that's kind of a new age thing to worry about the print run, because everybody's trying to find that variant and the exclusive and the elusive one. But I'm kind of ready to say, hey, I'll give up a signed Batman book if Greg Rucka did not sell more books in that era than Scott Snyder. And I think I might be kind of setting myself up here, but I'm thinking that run, well, not even thinking, I know that run, as I was going into the comic book store at the time, that run was really hot. The Fugitive and Murderer, that was a really, really hot run. So I'm staking my claim that Greg Rucka sold more books than Scott Snyder on that run, on those two particular story arcs.
I can't speak to that. Both runs I bought after the fact in trade. I was casually reading at the time. I definitely wasn't sort of had my finger on the pulse of what the diamond numbers look like every week and every month. But I will say, I don't know if the run numbers, the copies sold, equate to the level of which one is better. Mm-hmm. Because Rucka's run with Fugitive and Murderer, that was a pretty big crossover series, right? It ran through multiple Batman titles.
Exactly.
And so he had the benefit of multiple titles running every month concurrently, where if you missed one, the story wouldn't make sense, right? So most likely you bought all of them, regardless of if you liked it or not. Which is why I bring that up of does it really matter in the long run which one sold more?
Right.
For me, Snyder's run, regardless, it equates to more favorable in my eyes, is that it was consistently put out for, again, almost 10 years. He was the writer for Batman for almost 10 years. His run was uninterrupted. There wasn't, a whole lot of like guest writers, fill-ins.
A few, but for the most part, you're right.
Right. So he wrote everything the way he wanted to write it, and nothing was left unfinished. And we've certainly seen our share of popular stories that never finished.
Especially Batman.
Especially Batman. And yes, part of that has to do with sales, but part of that also has to do with the quality of the story as a whole, right? So you think about it from that perspective, he had to have been doing something right. People had to have been receptive to that. He wrote, whatever number, 60, 70 issues in a row.
Right.
So that's where I look at sort of, okay, did he really have a strong run?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think Batman's a very tough title to write for, both of us. Why we picked these two great writers is because they did something that people really liked.
Yeah.
Creative, different, imaginative. And Snyder had to do that for how many years? And again, I think there were some that people really, really liked, like the Court of Owls.
Right.
And I think some people, there were others where maybe it was, again, not as favorable to some of the fans.
I think because of the Court of Owls character and how that played with Thomas and Martha, that is memorable to me because he gave me more information about who those characters are and what their life was outside of the Wayne Manor, and it just drew me in more. So I have to say, for me, the Court of Owls was a really nice story. Also, you got a new character out of it, which was a bonus to that. It was good. It was really good.
And that's actually another good point. You just gave me another good point. Thank you. Was that I believe that Snyder was looking to create a lot of memorable moments in his Batman run. I think he was looking for as many as he could, actually, with, again, a lot of those high concepts, maybe not as relatable, not as many small moments with, human-esque interactions with characters. But he was going for that big, that grand, sometimes over the top, sometimes fantastical, but you're going to remember this.
There was a animation series that dealt with the Court of Owls. Am I right?
It was a Batman and Robin.
It was a Batman and Robin. Really good, where another important piece where Robin was like, nah, I'm switching sides. I'm going with the Court of Owls.
Yep.
And that was, again, and I think that's why that particular story stood out to me, even though I'm still giving it to Greg Rucka, was that he had that extra piece to make Damian go, you know what, I've always been feeling this way, and now that I actually have someone who could lead me, it's making me question your commitment, your sincerity, Bruce. And they fought tooth and nail. And Bruce actually felt like he was fighting for his son. He was fighting to keep his son. And again, it goes back to that real emotional, family, down-to-earth piece that I like, how Greg Rucka wrote Batman. That it was a good part of the run, which spawned a movie and an animation. I would love to see Batman, Murderer, and Fugitive as a 3-4 part animation would just blow things out the water.
I think that would be great, either in film or animation. the other thing that I thought of with Rucka, he has done those stories before. Like I said, he's done just straight up prose novels where there is sort of that dichotomy with either different sides of the law and there's relationship there. So that is sort of his bread and butter, which to me it's not a knock against him, but if he's done it before, it should be good. And again, I got to go back to Snyder. I haven't read his American Vampire or his Swamp Thing, but I can't imagine he is doing things in those two series that he did with Batman. And again,
it nowhere near it.
Right. So that's my point, is that he again had to experiment. He had to go out on a limb. I think this could have made or broke his career.
So all of those that are in favor of Rucka, put it down there and tell me why. And all of those that are in favor of Snyder, make sure you put that down there as well. And you know what? We might have missed some very important key points. Tell us what we missed. Put them down there in the bottom. Absolutely.
I called out my honorable mention. Ty, you got any honorable mentions?
You know, there was a really good, I want to say it's a doll maker story that it was very memorable that Dwayne McDuffie wrote. I want to say when Finch was writing Batman the Dark Knight, very good. Also not for children. I want to be clear about that one. That one is not for children. Those were some really good honorable mentions. And of course, I loved Long Halloween. It was a great, great story. Those are the Batman stories for me that really stick out.
I think for those viewers, listeners thinking, oh, these guys didn't bring up Frank Miller. I mean, are these guys really comic fans? Well, what else is there to be said about Frank Miller and Batman?
Right. I think off the top, you know, Frank Miller is up there, but for me, these other stories I really, really wanted to talk about.
Exactly.
That's what it was for me.
But guys and gals, if you want us to talk about Frank Miller and his Dark Knight and his Year One, anything Frank Miller, we probably should just do a whole episode devoted to Frank Miller.
We probably should, but you're right. I think, and I'm glad you said that. Don't think that we're skimping over Frank Miller. It's just Greg Rucka is something that I wanted to talk about more than I wanted to talk about the Frank Miller, because I know everybody's going to agree with Frank Miller. It's kind of like you say Batman, you're going to say, you know, Dark Knight Returns. Everybody's going to go, yep, I. So Greg Rucka, I think, really stunning writer. I think some people might have been sleeping on him. I think some people might have been like, I'm not really sure. So that's why I wanted to talk about Greg Rucka.
Yeah, same here. That's why I want to talk about Scott Snyder. I don't think people were sleeping on him, but I thought, you know, let's take this conversation up a notch. To Ty's point, we don't want to repeat the same thing with Frank Miller and Dark Knight Returns and Batman Year One.
Right.
But yeah, let us know, guys. You know, who did you pick? Should we have picked Frank Miller? Let us know.
Yeah. Or is there someone else out there you feel should have gotten the nod tonight instead of these two great writers?
That's right. So I think that wraps up our show for today. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, leave a comment below. Let us know your thoughts, and we'll be back again.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys.